Here we are at the end,
Hmm.
the conclusion of our thoughts on the Studio Ghibli series,
Yeah.
the Ghibli review, official review of all the movies we talked about. Um, so I thought I'd start this off by talking about like what my favorite was,
Yeah.
and then just kind of working through them.
Yeah. So you've never seen them. This is the
I had
first
never
time.
seen any of them until I saw Spirited Away once before,
Yeah.
and that was the only one I saw before.
Right.
The rest of them, this was all a completely fresh first time experience.
Hmm.
Um, I'll also admit the Studio Ghibli still, to my personal taste, I love the art style.
Yeah.
But it's very beautiful. It's very picturesque. I feel like you can take a still of any of them, and it looks like some background you can make.
Hmm.
Like it's beautiful.
Yeah.
That being said, my personal tastes also affected the list.
Hmm.
So, being a fan of like romance animes and such, I actually put House as my number one.
Okay.
Because I really do love a good love story.
Hmm.
I always have, and I think House is a good representation of that.
Hmm.
It's very much this is a picturesque love story. It's very reminiscent of Beauty and the Beast in some manner.
Hmm.
Um, and because of that, I put that at number one.
Yeah.
I think if I had to, I would say that would probably be uncontested number one.
Really.
The rest of them might be a little contested. That one I think is definitely my favorite by far.
Okay. Interesting. Should we go back and forth, or should we go?
Let's go back and forth. What would you say your number one would be?
My number one. This has been true for a while now. My
Mhm.
number one is Princess Mononoke.
Okay.
I love Mononoke. I guess I'm more of a fan of the action. I guess I'm more of a fan of the grand mythical
Mhm.
cinema stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the fantasy. Yeah, I mean, and I think definitely. Well, I don't know. I like all of them. I think Princess Mononoke for me is uncontested
Okay.
one for now. I think yeah, probably for me the last four are probably contested.
Yeah,
I would be
I
willing to
fully
change
agree.
my mind on the other ones, but
Mm-hmm. So why is Mononoke your favorite?
why?
Is there any one particular reason, or is it just because it's more high fantasy?
I think I like it's more mature. I
Mhm.
like it's more action. I
Mhm.
like there's romance, but like it's not the main focus. Like I
Right.
like romance, but I like when it's not the main focus.
Okay.
I like the characters. I
Mhm.
like how badass everyone is.
Yeah.
I like how stoic the main guy is. I like
Yeah.
the strong female characters.
Yep.
I like the kind of message almost of, kind of uniting nature and humans or whatever,
Mhm.
or like how they're in conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the story and how Ashitaka and Princess Mononoke kind of
Yes.
to bring them together and fix things and
Okay.
whatnot. Of course, I have a little bit of gripes with it. Like I wish maybe the antagonist got a little more consequences.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah, stuff like that. But I love all of that stuff, and I love the art style, and I love the weird. I love in all of them. I love the art style as
Mhm.
well, and I also in all of them I love the weird character designs, the
Yeah.
weird monster designs and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But in this one, I definitely top
It's
it.
interesting that you mentioned that there's a drawback to your number one, because even for me, House didn't really have any negatives to me.
Really,
There wasn't anything that I would say I would change or edit majorly. Like the closest thing I can think of is like maybe change some of the story beats to just have a slightly different order.
mm,
But other than that, I thought it was very well done.
really,
So it's very interesting that you still have the worldly view of like it's good, but there's still something I would change.
yeah. I think maybe that comes from a sense of since I've seen them before multiple
Mhm.
times, I'm
Mhm.
able to maybe point out more things. Like for me, Howl's Moving Castle, I feel like I could point out a couple things that I would change about it
Fair enough.
personally.
Fair enough.
But I think I do agree with you though. It'd probably mostly have to be with like story beats and
Mhm.
maybe just small changes.
Yes.
I think for me though as well, like with Princess Mononoke, the changes that I do think of are overall small.
Right. Right.
Like the only like I was saying, the only major one I can think of is changing the consequences for the
Yeah.
antagonist. But even that is like kind of minor. Like I
Yes.
wouldn't make it like a whole thing, like a whole revenge arc or anything
Right.
like
Right.
that. But yeah, so that's for me.
Okay. So it's actually funny because I put Mononoke as my second.
Right.
Mononoke, I do think was really strong. There were a couple elements of it. To your point, like the fact that there's no revenge or there's no consequence to it
Mhm.
in the grand scheme. It definitely took a little, and I think it's still a good romance story. But the fact that it ends so ambiguously to me was also
Mm.
docked at a couple
You
points.
see, I like that actually personally.
Really? Okay.
I like when they end ambiguously. I like when I mean, of course, I love when they give a solid ending and
Mhm.
they wrap everything up nice and tight. That's
Mhm.
nice too. But I also like when they leave a little room for you to think about it. Like they leave a little room for your imagination to be like, oh, like I wonder what happens after.
Right.
Which I guess also leaves a little more room for a sequel if they want to do that. But obviously, they
100%.
haven't done that.
Right.
But you can make a little sequel in your mind, and
You could.
that's
You
kind of
could.
fun.
Yeah.
So
And I do think that that's a very interesting point. I didn't think about it that way. I was more thinking just I like the fact that I don't have to do that.
yeah,
Like with um, House Castle, I didn't think what else is there. It was like okay, everything's been answered.
yeah,
Whereas with Mononoke, it was well, how does the relationship turn out? How is the city rebuilt? Do they still do the same practices? Do they maybe do more eco practices? None of that really gets touched on. And I don't mind it. It's not a negative, but the fact that there's no answers there and that I have to come up with them, I'm like, not as strong as just giving me those answers.
yeah, yeah. Okay, well, then to that point, my second was Spirited Away,
Okay.
actually, which yeah, I think in my top three, I mean, I must be spoiling a little bit, but all of them are like the darker ones, like the more
Yeah,
mature ones or whatever.
100%.
Yeah, I think Spirited Away, I think part of it is definitely the ending. It is a little more ambiguous in
Mhm.
terms of like she goes back to being human and with her mother and father, but you don't
Mhm.
really know what happens to Kohaku.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really know what happens to the spirit world. You don't really know how that affects her in the future and
Right.
whatever. And so I think part of me definitely loves to think about that and think about like, oh, like how she's gonna grow up into an adult and
Mm-hmm.
like how she's gonna move forward with these experiences and
Mhm.
stuff like that. And yeah, and then I love the darkness of it. Uh, love the art style, love the weird stuff going
So
on.
it's very interesting that you put it that way because that's my third.
Mhm.
Like it seems like we're in agreement that especially now that I'm older, it might be part of that effect. But like Spirited Away is my number three because it does have a lot more mature-esque themes of like this is death, this is spirits, this is chaos that goes with it, this is the fears that you have, these are the natural progression of things. And then it's like it had good characters.
Yeah.
Like Chihiro / Shay, she did really well. I think the Boilerman he's one of my favorite characters out of all of them.
Yeah, for sure.
Just because of how goofy he is.
Absolutely.
The Soot Sprites, of course, very, very big mention to them. Lynn, of course, gets an honorable mention because she's the big sister character that I think is the most relatable.
Yeah.
Because she comes in, she's like, I don't want anything to do with this. And then ends up going, well, you're okay, I guess.
Yeah.
Very, very much like a sibling.
Yeah. Once again, strong female character.
Yes.
Which
Yes.
I love to see that.
Yes. And then the way it ends isn't the reason I docked it. I actually docked it in my head because of the way it starts. And with how slow of a start and how ambiguous of a start.
Yeah.
Like you don't get into the story until you're 30 minutes in of okay, here's the problem, here's a potential gateway to solution. All that stuff doesn't happen until like 30 minutes into the movie, which I think is the longest out of all of them.
Yeah. You know, I can see that. I think for me, when I saw this as a kid, I think it maybe sits in my mind so much because at the beginning it's slow and then like the parents turning into pigs and stuff, like it hit hard, you know. And for me, like when it did get weird and stuff, and like I like when I saw it for the first time, and I'm watching through the start, and it's like, oh, they're going on some weird like adventure, and there's some like abandoned place or whatever. And you know, as a kid, I didn't really think much of it, and then they turn into pigs, and like spirits start chasing them. And I was like, what the hell is going on? And that stuck really, or that stuck with me.
Yeah.
So I think that's possibly another reason that I liked it, but I can 100% agree that like it is a slow start, and I could see how that kind of get like can we now cut this down?
Yeah, and that's also where I would say that there's a reason that would 3 and 2 are kind of contested, not strongly, but I still think Mononoke is my favorite because of there's a romance and other things like that, elements I usually enjoy over Spirited, but there could be instances where I prefer Spirited over Mononoke.
Yeah.
They are rarer, but they would be there.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, so for my third was Howl's Moving Castle,
okay.
obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess for me, I I liked it. I really thought about putting it second because it is more mature, it is more adult themed, it is more about young adults and stuff, which I like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I do like the art style, and I like the world, and I like the
Mm-hmm.
whole universe and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the only thing for me was maybe that like sometimes it felt like the romance was a little forced almost
I can
for
see that.
me.
I can
Like
see that.
I think like too like what we said in the last episode, like it's for me I said it started out it felt like her goal was to
Just break the
break the
curse.
spell. And also I think she kind of fell in love super easily. Like it kind of just feels like she was swept off her feet
I can see
by
that too.
Howl and
Yeah.
then she just fell in love.
Yeah.
So yeah, so for me I was a little bit like,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still really good.
Yeah.
It's
I
still
fully
really good.
agree.
And at the end of the day, like you get to the end and I think the romance ties together well.
Yeah.
So it's still good.
Yeah.
And it's so
So that puts my fourth. I put as Totoro.
Same.
Which so that's interesting that we now when we get to the kids ones, we actually agree on which one's better between the 2 and it's the one that's slightly weirder.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, for me, I think Totoro might have been partially there because of slightly more mature themes. Like,
Yeah.
slightly more, like, they did have the mother in the hospital and stuff.
Right.
And sure, it was still kid-centric and kid-friendly and, like, centered around childlike wonder.
Yep.
But there was still kind of a darker undertone.
Right.
And it was weirder.
Yes. It was weirder between the 2. And it's I also thought, for me, the reason I put Totoro over Kiki's is Totoro at least has like mystical, fanciful elements that are played throughout. Whereas with Kiki's, it comes and goes. It comes through like real and then not so real to real again.
Yeah.
Or not, it's not so real to not so real.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Especially considering that Kiki's like she loses her powers and she's just kind of a regular person for a while.
Right. And I think I don't enjoy that as much as I enjoy the as you said, the feeling of like childlike wonder of like, oh, this is cool, oh, this is interesting, oh, they're having fun, that's good. Stuff like that. The feeling of letting go and being able to feel like a kid a little bit versus Kiki's where it's like, I'm an adult the whole time.
Yeah.
There is no sense of kid. There's only adult.
Yeah. Teenage adult, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this was at the bottom. I think Ghibli is at its best when it's weird.
Yes.
It's at its best when it's fantastical,
Yes.
mythical,
Yes.
magical. That's when it's at its best. It's at its best when it's dark. It's at its
Yes.
best when it's gruesome.
It's at its best when it's not real.
Yeah.
When Ghibli goes into the fantasy and truly mythical, non-realistic things, I think Ghibli gets strongest. And I think it gets weaker the more it tries to have on reality.
Yeah.
And I think even our rankings show that.
Yeah.
Like we agree that the high fantasy, high themed, high energy ones are all better than the one that's the most real.
Yeah.
That has the most relatability, the most. This is kind of just life and how you have to deal with it.
Yeah, and I think another way to put it is Ghibli is at its best when it's weaving in like real, a real message, real emotions into a fantastical, mythical world.
Yes. I also think that's very true. And I found it interesting, and I only noticed it on one of them. I don't remember which one, but it's interesting how some people call Ghibli the Disney of the East. And how, ironically, one of them did have Disney as a mention in the opening sprawl things. I don't remember if it was Spirited Away or if it was Totoro, but one of the two of them actually did have Disney mentioned in it. It had Tokyo Disney.
Really?
And I was like, huh. So maybe it is actually kind of crossed over a little bit and very, very co-existing, if you will.
Yeah, I didn't really even see that, but it also, to your point about Howl's, it's kind of similar to Beauty and the Beast.
Exactly. The story is very much the here's someone who thinks they're ugly and thinks they don't deserve love, and here's another person who's just looking for love and they fall in love, and it just kind of works for them.
Yeah.
After a big drama unfolds.
Yeah, but I do think if Ghibli is definitely overall a lot more dark than Disney and stuff.
Oh, 100. And I think they also have the freedom to be that way.
Yeah,
I think Disney has always tried to be so much more pure and so much more super kid friendly. Whereas with Ghibli, they just kind of did it because they wanted to tell a story.
yeah. Which also, I think for me, for Disney, I think I prefer when they get a little darker.
Yeah,
I think I
I'd
prefer
agree.
when they get a little more.
I'd agree. I would think that their darker themed movies and their like Maleficent did great, and that wasn't because it was friendly. It was because it was the more dark theme of that whole era. Um, they're not necessarily evil; they're just misunderstood, and that seems to work a lot better, at least in theaters anyway.
Yeah, and then I think for me, one of them was Atlantis. I think it was.
I can see Atlantis. Yep.
Yeah, like they've got like the weapons, they've got
Yep.
like the war going on,
Yep.
stuff like that, industrial. So
Yep.
similar.
Very similar. And it's interesting to see that crossover. Like they came out in similar times too. Like Atlantis was early 2000s, and House I believe was 2004. So it's very interesting to see like parallels between different conversations that happen in the movies. I think overall, regardless of like who you are, Ghibli is definitely something you should see, just because of the impact it has.
Yeah.
Because like it's become a household name now, and I think that's something that just goes to show how powerful it was.
Yeah.
And it still is.
It still is. Yeah. It's worth a watch.
Yeah.
100%.
It is worth a watch. If nothing else, taking a watch of at least one of these, I think, is the greatest thing you can do, because it enlightens you to a lot.
Yeah.
Whether it be just the difference in culture, the difference in animation, the difference in like beliefs, just all these different little things that you don't think of, but totally have merit.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess it kind of makes me think, if you had to show Ghibli to someone, you had to introduce Ghibli to someone, what would you show them first? What movie would you show first?
That's a good question. It would depend on how old they are. If they're older, I think I would start with Mononoke. I think you're very much on the spot with that one being a good example of just how much they can do. If they were younger, I would think Totoro.
Yeah.
I think it would be one of those two, because those are the iconic. When I think Ghibli, I think of those two.
Okay.
Like I think of the icons that come from both of them.
Yeah.
And then Spirited is probably the ambiguous case.
Yeah.
Where I think you could show it either way.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I think for me, I think I would show Mononoke to an older person, adult, whatever. But yeah, I think younger person, it's either Spirited Away or Totoro probably.
Yeah.
I maybe lean more Spirited Away. Maybe I want to like introduce them a little to the darker themes.
Okay.
So that they can maybe enjoy it more when they're older.
Fair enough. That's very fair.
But it's in the middle. It's in between.
Spirited being put in the middle is actually very accurate, I think. Just not just in ranking, but in general.
Yeah.
It seems to be the middle ground of both the adult themes and the kid themes.
Yeah, both worlds.
And the fact that it's very iconic. Like there are so many scenes that are taken out just from that movie. I think compared to the rest of them, they're few and far between. Whereas Spirited, almost every third scene you've probably seen a screenshot of before.
Yeah.
Even if you don't know much about Ghibli, you at least know the screenshot, and you're like, "This is from Spirited Away."
Yeah, but we love Ghibli.
Yeah, we're thorough Ghibli enjoyers. We're very happy to have been able to review this.
Yeah. How was it first time?
For a first time, I think this was really good.
Yeah.
I think it's a strong place in my heart and my soul, and just because of the nature of it, the beauty of it, the storylines were very compelling, the action was very good, the themes, depending on the movie, some were better than others in my opinion, but I think that was by design.
Yeah.
And I think it also goes to show the longer that they worked on it, the more they kind of nailed their stride. Because the Totoro and Kiki, which are the older of the five, are, I think, a little weaker in story, but better in art. And then later on, I think you get better story with just the same art. Yeah. And I think that's what makes Howl's my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's good. We did watch it like back to back.
Yes.
At least definitely a couple of them.
Yes.
Did that affect you in any way? Like,
That's a good question. I don't know if that affected my opinion of them, honestly. I couldn't say.
yeah.
Because of the ones we watched back to back, we watched Totoro, then Kiki's, and then Princess.
Mhm.
So I would have thought, if and this is my logic of it, if it did have an effect, it would have put Princess lower than my second.
Mm.
I think Princess Mononoke being my second just goes to show I did enjoy it the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because Mononoke was the one we watched last
Mm-hmm.
on that day.
Yeah. I think I do agree. I think for me, especially because I've seen it multiple times, I definitely, I started seeing similarities. We started talking about the reusage of assets and stuff like that. But overall, I think they all stand as their own movies very well.
Yes.
Even though it's Ghibli.
Yes.
You can tell that.
Yes.
But they still stand alone.
Yes.
Which is
they're very strong on their own, as they are together.
Yeah. And then I guess we should talk about why did we put Kiki's at the bottom?
So for me, putting Kiki's at the bottom was just because it got too real.
Mm-hmm.
It's that, when someone goes, "You're being too real, I need you to stop."
Yeah.
That's kind of what Kiki's did for me.
Yeah.
It got way too real of like, she's struggling, she's in a hard place, she's going through all these trials, and that felt too real.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that doesn't seem fanciful or what I want in a movie.
Yeah.
That's trying to pull me out of reality. Because that just feels too planted in reality.
Yeah. Yeah, we touched on that a little bit. I can definitely see that.
What was your bottom? For someone who's seen all of them, I'm interested is it a similar reason? Is it because it's too real, or is it because of something else you saw?
Not necessarily. I think that's maybe part of it. I think like we talked about, it's better when it's weirder. It's better when it's fantastical and stuff. Other than that, though, I think maybe part of me is like, it's teenage, so maybe it's a time I don't really want to think about or whatever, or don't really want to go back to.
Yep.
Other than that, I guess like it's just not it's maybe a little more boring or not as interesting as the other ones. And I don't know, and she's kind of just working and stuff like that, and then like they take away the magic too. And I think like also they kind of like, it started out, I thought you think it would be more about her coming into her own as a witch,
right?
But then it's just about like teenage angst and kind of romance and stuff like that, and jealousy and stuff.
Yeah.
Which I think was kind of a little weaker than if they had gone the route of her really coming into her own as a witch, kind of figuring out what her powers are and stuff like that. And also like maybe like also if she wasn't like dismissive of Tubbo in the start, maybe it wouldn't have been this whole like push and pull between her and Tubbo, this whole like romance teenage angst thing. Maybe it could have been more like she settled in and she like met a lot of people and she met a lot of great friends, but then like the struggle is she's really struggling with her witchcraft, and she's really struggling with that, and then maybe they help her through it or something like that, and she comes to her own. So something like that may be more interesting to me. So yeah, I guess similar reason as to why it's at the bottom, maybe slightly different. Because I don't exactly hate that they're kind of
I think in my overall list of movies I've ever seen, it's still, top 20-ish.
Yeah.
But it's still, of the Ghibli movies I've seen now, it is not my top one.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, but I think we're both in agreement on that. I think throughout this, so we took a lot of notes.
Yeah.
I think throughout this, I think it was funny. I started like, we mentioned it a couple times. I really just started like being like, oh, this side character's chill. This side character's dope. This side character's chill. Which actually for Kiki's, I think that maybe had one of the best showings of that. Like the bakery guy, the baker.
Yeah.
He was probably the best showing for me of like a side character having a lot of character. And
fair enough.
I'm really loving that. But that's like, there's a lot of that in the movies. So I started writing that, and that's cool to see. So I love that. I love the art style, obviously.
I think for me, if nothing else, for me with the notes, I like doing it from the story beat perspective because that was my first time. I think that's part of the reason I did story beats instead of consistent, here's my thoughts, comparing, contrasting.
Yeah.
Because I was like, the story beats are what bring up in my mind.
Yeah.
This is what happens here, and why it happens here is what I want to talk about. Why this is happening now is what I want to talk about because that's the interest to me.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about this. We talked about this a couple times off screen, and you guys will see it back in the recordings. Yeah, you talk a lot more about the story beats. You remember the story beats. I remember maybe like little things, little details or whatever. I think I did like they all stand alone on their own, but to what we were talking about earlier, I did compare them a lot. I did start talking about the usage of assets and stuff like that.
You notice the things with the finer comb, and I notice things with the more broad stroke.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it this. I would hope that makes it a stronger case. And then, honestly, I would think the only thing I want to kind of close on is that this was surprisingly fun.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't expecting this to be as fun as it was. Like especially for someone who has never done this kind of thing before, doing these kind of recordings, doing this kind of prep work for it. It was fun. It was interesting. It was something I never thought I would have the capacity to do, and yet here I am doing it.
Yeah, no, this was fun, and it was always whenever we got into the seat and start talking, I think we really started bouncing off of each other because we both have a lot of thoughts on the movies, which I think that's great.
I'd also like to see, and especially people watching, I would love to hear their comments on like what they think of our first episode versus now. Like, do we have a better dynamic now? Is it more fluid?
Yeah.
Is it more, what are the good things? What are the bad things? I mean, I'm sure there were some bad things too.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, what was it that was good and what was it that was bad? It would be very interesting to hear. But with that, unless you have anything else to add.
I think that's it, man. I think that's it. This was fun. Maybe the only thing is I've watched these movies a couple times.
Yeah.
So it's maybe not as shiny and new to me.
Yes.
But it's always a good watch. And like sometimes when I was like, oh, I have to watch this movie, I can put it down for 2 hours.
Yeah.
But then I get to watching it and I'm like, oh yeah. I love this movie. Yeah. So it was fun.
It was great.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you taking the journey with me, man. It was lots of fun.
For sure.
So we'll see everyone and have a good time.
Bye.